Hey everybody, some Gadget Guy here, and today we're going to be taking a quick first impressions look at the Samsung Galaxy S4 Zoom. As you can see, it's already out of the box, so why bother pretending that we're going to do some kind of unboxing? We already have the phone outside to play with. This is, of course, Samsung's update to last year's really fun Galaxy camera. And one of the things that was lacking about the Galaxy camera we all kind of wanted was just simply the ability to make phone calls, since this was a 4G LTE connected smart device. Well, Samsung has miniaturized a lot of what we liked about this camera, and now we have a phone with a honkin' big 10x optical zoom with image stabilization ready to go. So let's take a look around the features on the Galaxy S4 Zoom. Now, the actual phone stats themselves aren't going to be particularly exciting. What Samsung has opted to do here is present us a Galaxy S4 Mini front with a photography back. This is a 4.3-inch screen, but they've opted for a QHD display. It's 1/4 of an HD display, which is a 540 by 960. So it's not even a 720p display. I am a big fan of AMOLED, and I don't mind taking a little bit of the resolution hit for how good AMOLED displays look when you fire them up. The color saturation, especially when you get into dark colors, just how black and inky blacks get on the screen. It is still a nice experience, and I do prefer the AMOLED screen experience over the LCD screen experience. Obviously, that's going to be a bit more of a personal preference. But after having used some really good 720p displays at this screen size, going back to a QHD display just feels like a little bit of a step backwards. And it's something that, especially as we're focused on photography, that little bit of extra resolution I think would have helped the photography experience. This allows Samsung to pack in some slightly lower power internals. We're dealing with one of their dual-core Exynos processors, 1.5 gigahertz in speed, and 1.5 gigabytes of RAM, which is a decent amount of RAM for a device or a phone this size. You could usually get away with 1 gig, but that's probably due to the camera tech that's bolted onto the back. And taking a quick tour around the device, we of course have the soft capacitive buttons for menu and back here on the corners, with a hardware home button here right down center. We've got the earpiece light sensors up top, and a 1.9 megapixel front-facing camera. On the top edge of the camera, or the right-hand side of the phone, we've got the dual-stage shutter button right there. We've got the power button and the volume rocker. On the opposite side, next to the tripod mount, we have the micro SD card slot and the little lanyard tie. You can fit a lanyard right through those two little holes right there. On the top of the phone, we've got the headphone jack and the infrared port. And on the bottom, we've got our micro USB port. That's a little microphone port right there. And a very interesting battery slot, which if we open this, we can open the battery that way and it pops right out. And I think I probably just turned the phone off. And this is where we can also access our SIM card. It's a very interesting locking mechanism, and it definitely feels a bit more camera than phone. But it does help us get to everything that we need to without having any kind of removable backplate, which we obviously can't have on a phone like this. But this is the side of the device that we care about. This is why we're actually even talking about this phone. We've got a little speaker up here in the corner. I already have a speaker test out for the Galaxy S4 Zoom. Surprisingly, this is one of the loudest and nicest speakers I've used on a phone in a while. We have a proper xenon burst flash right here, little focus assist light right there. And then, of course, like we mentioned before, the 10x optical image stabilized zoom lens, which is paired up with a 16 megapixel backside illuminated image sensor. This is a 1/2.3 inch sensor, which is actually smaller than the sensor size on the Lumia 1020, but absolutely dwarfs most of the sensors that we find in phones like the iPhone 5S or even the Galaxy S4. And to save space around the shutter button where we would normally have some kind of zoom rocker for the zoom lens, the Galaxy S4 Zoom actually has this cool little, where this would normally be like a focus ring on a proper SLR or other camera. This is how we control the zoom. And just by dialing that lens, it allows us to extend the zoom out or to roll it back, just like so. So we've already talked a little bit about the phone hardware, what it's like. I mean, the experience of using the Galaxy S4 Zoom is very much, as a phone, is very much using a Galaxy S4 Mini. So no one's going to be overly impressed or wowed by that kind of performance. We know what compromises Samsung had to make to deliver lower powered hardware. And we also sort of understand this experience just as, we've played with other phones like this in the past. This is the AT&T variation of the Galaxy S4 Zoom, which it is a 4G LTE enabled handset. Call performance has been great. Like I said, the speaker on the back is awesome. The earpiece speaker is good. Samsung's really gotten after their quality control in terms of whether or not these devices can make phone calls and get online. Data performance in my neck of the woods has been pretty good. AT&T has been building out their LTE network in my area, so now I can pretty much count on at least a 10 megabit connection anywhere I go. It's nice seeing them get a little more competitive with their product, their device offerings and their device lineup. But where we do get a little more excited is when we fire up this camera app and we get to see the synergy between Samsung's camera hardware and their software. Performance is pretty quick considering how low power the internals are, especially when you compare it to some of, like, say, the Windows phones out there, like the Lumia 1020. Firing up the monster camera on the Lumia 1020 is a slightly more intensive procedure than what we see here. Thankfully, the 16 megapixel image sensor doesn't seem to be taxing Samsung's dual core quite as much, and it might also be graphics optimized. There is a Mali 400 GPU in here, which might be taking some of the burden off of the CPU for these amazing camera functions. But here's our standard Samsung camera app. It's a nice, cleaned up, updated version of what we had on the Galaxy camera. It's a little less complicated, but we still have access to a number of really great features and modes that we're going to take a quick look at right now. So we have basic information just running around this. This is basically in full auto mode right now. You can see that right there. And we have some controls that we can jump into here. If we want to do voice controls, if we want to do auto sharing, we have timer features, GPS features, which I always turn off my GPS. And we've got the flash settings right there. If we want to do an automatic flash, if you want to manually control your flash adjustments. And then going into this gear gives us a little bit more control over even some of the other settings and features that we can get into, what size photos, if we want to do more square 16:9 widescreen, what our video settings are, leaving this at, let's see, can we do up to 30 frames per second at 1080p, 60 frames per second at 720? That's not bad considering the lower power processor that they put into this. Multi-motion, let me tap on that. This is if you wanted to do more faster photography or more time-lapse looking video. You can go to 1/8 the speed, quarter speed, half speed, or then we're going to leave this set at standard 1 speed. Then our sound, quiet zoom turned on. So this slows down the zoom motor so that as you're zooming in and out while you're shooting video, the zoom lens won't make additional noise that the phone will then pick up on. And then a wind cut feature, which is off right now. We're going to turn that on just in case. And this is a noise reduction setting right there. Then our sharing features, a share shot or buddy photo share, chat on photo share. And lastly, we've got just the various, like if you want camera beeps, descriptions, guidelines. Let's go ahead and turn on the guidelines. I like my 3x3. And how soon to auto close a camera, review photo after you take it, signature, date, time, adjust, GPS tag, which I leave off, voice control features, the autofocus lamp, and then what kind of start mode. And start mode lets us know whether or not we want to stay with the last mode that we were in or if we want to go into auto mode. Now, speaking of the various modes that we can use, we've got a handy little dial right there. Now, at any time, you can just instantly take a picture or instantly jump into video off of these two buttons going into a full auto sequence. And then if you don't want to use the hardware zoom ring, you can also use these zoom in and zoom out buttons and the various modes that we can get into. Let's see. So we've got auto, we've got the smart modes, we've got expert modes, and then we've got my mode, which is sort of a shortcut to get to something that you can program. The various smart modes are very much like what we saw on the Galaxy camera. It takes a second extra to fire up, though. That's kind of interesting. So macro positions the lens in a way that allows you to get super close to your subjects. Food shot, which basically just sounds like a saturation setting. That's kind of interesting. Party indoor. This helps ramp up ISO, opening the aperture as much as possible for that indoor lighting, low lighting situations. Action freeze, the opposite. It helps speed up the shutter so that you can stop action in movement. Rich tone is there phrase for an HDR. I wish they'd just call it an HDR photo. And Samsung tries to make it sound like it's something fancy. Panorama setting, which allows you to do panoramas. Waterfall setting is another one of those which you could completely accomplish on your own. It's basically just a smaller aperture and a longer exposure time so that water starts to get streaky looking. This is a harder setting to use handheld though, and it's nice that Samsung gave us a tripod mount to accomplish stuff like that. Animated photo, create a picture containing selected moving objects by animating parts of this picture. There are a number of different sort of cinematograph and GIF settings on various other cameras, and it looks like that's what we do here. A drama shot, where if you're taking a series of photos, you can create like a little montage of action in there. We've got an eraser setting. Oh, and this is sort of like those sure shot, best shot settings on some of the other cameras we've played with, where if you take a series of photos and someone walks into your shot, it can look at what the background of that image was and then eliminate things from the background. Sound in shot gives you just a couple seconds of audio behind what's happening there. And this can actually be really helpful for those times where you're taking photos of something and you want to say, you know, like, hey, I'm at this place, or hey, we're looking at this famous work of art. And sound in shot can help you sort of add like voice memos or voice tags to your photography. And what I always think is funny about stuff like silhouette is if you shoot into the sun, you're pretty much going to have a silhouette image anyway. But again, the camera is trying to anticipate those types of settings for you so that it can help arrive at the kind of shot that you want. How useful a standalone silhouette shot might be, I'm not entirely sure, but if you're one of those people that even remembers that it's there in the situation that you need to shoot, then maybe it could be kind of helpful. Same thing, we've got sunset shots so that it can take nice, warm, rich, vivid, colored images of the sun setting. Nighttime, again, opening up the lens, the aperture, making sure you can get in there and take nice shots of street scenes. Your obligatory fireworks mode, which never really quite works the way you think it will, but, you know, 4th of July, you want to take some shots of fireworks, this might get that done for you. Light trace is another one of those like waterfall mode, where again, you don't, oh, and it even says a tripod is recommended. Basically, it's a long exposure setting, so you want to set this down or you want to get it on some kind of mini tripod, because hand holding for light trace probably isn't going to work. Smart mode suggestion settings, where the camera will automatically take a series of photos and then help you, and then you can determine which one you like best depending on what type of exposure and color saturation you might like from those. A beauty face mode, which just kind of helps soften skin, helps skin tone. Best photo takes a series of shots, and then it tells you what photo it thinks is the best, but then you can pick which one. Continuous shot. The camera is capable of 4 shots per second, which isn't too shabby. A best face mode, again, taking a series of shots, you can make sure that everyone in your photos is both looking at the camera and smiling and not blinking. Kids shot plays a sound to attract the child's attention. Wow. Okay, so we're really reaching for some of these modes here. So this is a kid distraction mode, which should help you look at the camera and to hopefully get a good shot of your kids. No more of you having to make silly sounds and faces behind the camera. The camera will now do it for you. Landscape setting, dawn setting, I guess that's the opposite of a sunset setting. Snow setting, this is ridiculous. We're on, but this is the last one. And a snow setting, snow is really difficult to photograph because it's so white and it's so reflective that light bouncing off of snow, it's very difficult to capture a good snowy shot. And now we're finally back to macro. Wow, Samsung put a lot of stuff into this camera. Oh, so it selected me into macro mode. So we're also going to come in here and go into our expert mode settings. So this is manual, so we can control shutter speed, aperture. Nope, come on. I don't like that it skips me over things that I can't use in that mode. So already I don't love how this is arranged. So in manual, you can control various things like your shutter speed and your aperture, your ISO, your white balance, your focus. Oh, that's the metering settings, and then your drive mode. Okay, so in your shutter speed, you can control how fast. Let's see how fast we can get our shutter, or how long we can open up our shutter. So manually, we can keep our shutter open for 16 seconds, and you can see that completely whites out the scene. But our fastest shutter available is 1/2000th of a second, which isn't bad for a point-and-shoot camera. Okay, so now our aperture adjusts the amount of incoming light and blurriness of the background by increasing or decreasing this value. This opens up how big the iris is in front of the lens. The lens on this is actually a little on the slower side. Maximum aperture of f3.1 when it's fully zoomed wide. So it's when it's fully zoomed out. And we can swap this all the way down to f8. Now, what's interesting is in this mode, it's only giving me the option of f3.1 or f8. And it doesn't seem to give me anything in between. Now, I'm sure I'm missing some setting in there, and I'll play with it a little bit more just to see why that's being such a pain in the butt. And I will report back to you when we have a full-fledged review. We can also jump in and control our ISO, and this is the sensitivity of the sensor of the camera. We can crank this all the way up to ISO 3200, which is pretty great. And what's cool is whenever you do anything which might negatively impact your photography, like obviously this is gonna completely blow out the scene right here, your meter, your little exposure meter right there turns into a red icon, just to let you know. When you're in manual, you can't control the meter. What is really frustrating is that the camera won't stay on the meter. I would like to see how high or how low my adjustments have impacted the photography. On any other camera, you would see, you know, like, hey, you're 2 stops over, you're 3 stops under. And now it just takes you all the way back up to shutter speed. It doesn't even take you to aperture. And that's really friggin' frustrating, is now every single time it moves me, it's gonna pop up this helpful tooltip. I'm in your expert mode. I don't need to know what the friggin' aperture setting does every single time I use it. That is not helpful, Samsung. And we've got a white balance mode. If we wanna change what the white balance is, we can make our shots warmer, colder, really cold, and then dial in a specific Kelvin, which is cool. We can also input a specific custom white balance. And again, this is sort of UI stuff that kind of bothers me. When I move to one of the major settings, it has to tell me what is the ISO sensitivity to adjust the ISO sensitivity by increasing or decreasing this value. Great. Okay, so now let me go into white balance. It's going to tell me what to adjust the white balance using the light source. But if you didn't know what a K meant, what a Kelvin value was, or what, you know, a custom white balance icon is, why aren't you giving me tooltips now, Samsung? This is actually even more vital to know what all of these individual settings really do. That's the kind of design stuff that kind of bugs me. Anyway, moving on. We've got our metering so that we can do spot metering, or sort of take like an estimated value of the entire scene. And then we can also do our drive mode, changing the number of pictures that we can do if we want like a faster shooting speed. Again, this camera's capable of 4 shots per second, which is pretty sweet. And that's your full manual settings. You can also go into a program mode. Let me get into here. And then this, you just tell it how bright or how dark you want the scene to be. And see, now we're in the this little metering icon here, this exposure icon, and we can't go to. Yeah, see, that really bugs me. So I can't go to my shutter speed or my aperture setting, but it dumps me back into the EV meter, and then it explains to me again what the EV meter is, and I really wish it wouldn't do that. And I know there's a setting buried somewhere in this friggin' software where I can disable that, but that is tremendously obnoxious out of the box performance. But anyway, so now I can do things like say I really want to make, whoops, let me get it on the right. So now if I really want to make this scene bright, I can give it another 2 stops. I can go up to 2 stops in either direction. So I can either go 2 stops brighter or 2 stops darker. Now, because I can't go back to my aperture setting, I don't know what the aperture of the scene is. It would be helpful if I could go back to my shutter speed and see, oh, well, when I'm under 2 stops, what is the shutter speed of this scene? But Samsung won't give me that information. It won't let me just stay there and get a sense of what it is that I'm shooting. And it's those kinds of training wheels that really tick me off, especially as this is not going to be a phone for your average consumer. This is going to be a phone for someone who's looking to merge their high-end point-and-shoot experience with their mid-range smartphone experience, which means, and even if you're watching this video, it means you're probably smarter than the average bear, and their hand-holding here is intrusive. It actually gets in the way of some of their functionality, but I digress. And the other settings that you can change are things like your ISO, If you want to change your ISO, you can change your white balance in program mode. You can change your metering, and of course, you can change your drive speed. And then this C mode, let's see what they call C mode. A color wizard mode. Okay, so color wizard mode is actually it's very similar to the program mode and how it functions. There, the EV brightness pop up. It's very similar to how it functions in program mode, only now you've got different settings for controlling color adjust. So if we want to make everything sort of a red tint, more of an orange tint, more of a green tint, we can go through the entire color spectrum, and it's sort of like a light filter application. Then moving over into saturation, this is actually a nice setting that I wish was just in the rest of the manual and program mode settings. I find that small sensor-sized cameras tend to do two things. They tend to overexpose the scene, and they tend to oversaturate the scene. And HTC camera apps, for example, even in the regular stock interface and you're shooting full auto, you can go in and control the saturation. So if you want to take some of the juice out of the color in the scene, especially helpful when you're shooting lots of red in the scene, small digital sensors have trouble not blowing out or clipping the color red. This would be a very helpful feature to have just within the entire camera interface, but you can only really access it here in this color wizard mode. And ditto this, sharpness control. I want sharpness control over the whole camera app. Contrast control. I want contrast control over the whole camera app. Again, those are very helpful settings for people who are into their photography, who want better shots than just your random Instagram pics of food, which I do a lot of. But I want this kind of control throughout the entire camera experience. It just sort of reinforces why most people end up staying in full auto. When you go into your smart modes, and you see so many different or various options for what kind of photography you can do. And they're all super hyper specialized. I mean, these are all like one-off situations. It actually is sort of a glut. It's more than what we need. But then when we get into modes that help us achieve specific aspects of what kind of photography we're trying to accomplish, this hand-holding prevents us from doing the kind of work that I think people would be interested in doing on a camera solution like this. And so, folks, I didn't mean to get so frustrated. I'm actually really looking forward to putting this device through its paces, because it's Samsung's competition for phones like the Lumia 1020, which I absolutely adored this year. And I'm willing to overlook some of the phone compromises as long as I get that really nice camera experience, and I get cranky when software gets in the way of my nice phone and camera experience. But I'm going to be using this for a little while longer. Like I said, I've already posted a speaker test, so you can hear the speaker on the Galaxy S4 Zoom, and I'm about halfway through shooting all of my samples for a proper camera test, so you can see video samples from the Galaxy S4 Zoom. So be on the lookout for those. As always, folks, thanks so much for watching. I will have a proper review out soon, and I will catch you all on the next video.